Hello, Brian.
Hey, Adam, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. You made it.
I made it just in the nick of time.
There was a moment where, and I was, of course, following your flight en route.
Right, like it's Elon Jet, exactly.
Elon Jet, exactly. I am thinking, well, maybe we need to get going if we have to get going without you here, and have you maybe you're going to be joining in as you're kind of walking, on the concourse or something. So I will need to kick off the recording bot. And I'm just describing this to Steve Klapnick, and I'm like, there's a wolf named Jeff. Is that right? He's like, I think you mean Craig. And it was Jeff with a G in my. I go, I don't know. Anyway, so I don't feel like I was that close. I think and now that I'm looking at it, that's not what is that?
What is
Craig?
the Craig?
In your head, you sounded weirder about it than I heard you saying it to me. It was a very normal question of how do I set on the recording. So what do you see? You're okay.
Well, it's just wolf named Jeff with a G. Can you hear yourself? I mean, this is okay.
What is wolf? What you're saying, wolf? I'm
saying
canid?
Wolf.
Okay.
Yes, the canid. What is the icon there for our friend Craig?
Oh, got it.
I mean, it's not a wolf.
I mean, it's the bear. Yeah,
Is it a bear with a pacifier? What's going on with the bear? I don't want to.
It's got a microphone.
Bro. I agree that at the resolution, it is a little hard to tell exactly what it is.
I mean, I'm going with pacifier on that one. Are you certain it's not a pacifier? Could it be a pacifier? All right.
Could be. Brian, before we get into it, I just want to make sure you're not sounding millennial podcast audio quality.
Okay.
And I just wanted to check.
No, this is true. Is it terrible?
No, it's totally fine.
It should be serviceable, but not millennial podcast quality.
Dude, it is
vaguely radio.
Right.
You're like an interlude of a 90s rock song, and you're going to say 2 sentences and then cut back to the normal.
Yeah, he's ready to spit. Exactly. You sound totally serviceable, just not. It sounds like you're not in the litter box, as it were.
I am not in the litter box. Yeah. Yes, I'm not in the litter box
problem.
Because I felt for this that I needed to be among my books. I
almost spit out my water.
I'm clothed, by the way. I mean, I realized
I don't know why why would you bring that up? Why would you?
Because I'm clothed now. I put clothes on. After I rubbed them all over my body. Look, I'm sorry.
No, it's great.
This is what you're missing out on by being, an ebook reader. You missed the opportunity to rub your books all over yourself.
I'm very excited to talk about a paper book that I'm holding with me right now.
Oh boy!
Radio sound effects right there.
Radio sound effects. That's like the feet walking across.
Drive ball to center field, right?
Okay, what is that paper book that I heard distinctly here on the Radio Time Hour? Yes.
Yeah, so this is our time-honored, I guess, tradition of talking about books we're reading. And as a stage dive, it's going to be very important for people to raise their hand to talk about the books that they're reading. But
yes.
A book that I'm reading, actually, I just finished it on the airplane. I was coming back from Grandmasters Nationals, where we finished a ignominious 7th. And I finished on the plane. A book that someone DM'd or tweeted at us, Brian, and I don't think you noticed it. Yeah,
okay.
And I was going to present this to you at some point, and I guess this is the point. But there is a book about Sun and about McNeely, written in about 1998, 99.
Yeah. I have not read it. I've seen it. I know. I can visualize the cover. What's it called? It is called.
Well, I'm gonna give you one guess because the title is eerily and I think accidentally prophetic, and it's playing on Sun.
Yeah, and it's not guess. Java Man. No. It's. I do not remember the title. What is the title?
High Noon.
High Noon.
Right. By Karen Southwick.
Okay.
And it was it was pretty good. It was a pretty good kind of chronicle about 99.
But you said 99. Sorry, you said that. So
and that's why I feel like High Noon was so appropriate of a title, because they can't have known that it was about to be. I mean, dusk and then midnight. But talking about from the start of sun to accidentally its peak at high noon.
Yes.
And like, not tons and tons of technical details, but good stuff about Gosling and Joy and John Gage, and stuff about the founder squabbles early on. And it was not too long, pretty good, and certainly for someone who came in right after that, I'm kicking myself that I didn't read this 25 years ago or whatever. But really, I think they captured a lot of the management zeitgeist, this kind of teetering between chaos and organization. Captured that pretty faithfully.
Yeah, interesting. I feel that like the Sun is to blame not for the most mendacious of Google's management, but for the most incompetent. You know what I mean? Like that the incompetent streak in Google's management, I think you can chalk up to Sun. In that, like, Sun did believe incompetent is a little too strong, but hands off for sure.
Well,
in ways that were positive often.
I mean, and I only came in after the end of the planets, but I guess there was this management paradigm right there. You go. I know you were right in the middle of it. But where basically, I think the idea was sort of to let independent organizations be independent and entrepreneurial, but the end effect was that a customer ostensibly buying from Sun was talking to like 5 different organizations that mutually hated each other, or were trying to resell each other's stuff with a markup.
Is planet the metaphor you want to go for here? You know what I mean? It's just like, does this make sense? It's like in our solar system, only one planet is habitable. It's only one of the
which is Earth, right?
Right. Which one of these is Earth? Like which is Venus? Which is Mercury? The planets have nothing to do with one another. You can't get from one of the planets to the. It's like, really? Like, can't we? I bet we could come up with a better metaphor. In fact, I'm not sure we can come up with a worse metaphor. So for people, the planets were the different divisions inside of Sun. So we were at Sunsoft, which if for those folks that are kind of longtime Sun watchers, you can blame the planet model for the fact that the compilers are no longer free. That was Sunsoft trying to monetize the compilers because Sunsoft needed to monetize itself, and it needed to treat Sun Microsystems Computer Corporation (SMCC) like just another customer, which was not. It was bad. You had SMCC and you had JavaSoft and then you had
Sunsoft,
Sunsoft, Spark Microelectronics, and then it got weird. Then there were they started these new planets. It was like like Pluto. Like you had these things that are like, oh, this is no longer a planet. This is now just like a celestial object now, and it was a mess. The whole thing was a big mess.
But I learned about this thing News, like this a predecessor to X Windows.
News, yeah, absolutely,
that I knew nothing about. So that's like
Gosling's first. That's like it was a big deal.
No, for sure, it was a big deal, and I think Sun really tried to make it a thing, and it didn't go. And I think that then when Java kind of rolled around, they were like, let's not do News again, and it sort of almost directly spawned out of the failure of News. The folks involved were, one of them was one of the key folks in Java was about to leave to go to Next, had signed an offer, and got yanked back by Scott McNeely. Actually, they were on the same pickup hockey team, and Scott kind of pulled him back. So anyway, a bunch of interesting anecdotes for the Sun lovers on the call.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I can see. I know Tom is here. I'm sure Tom's read High Noon or not, but
yeah. And Tom, there's definitely an anecdote about you in there, Tom, about some pranks that you pulled. So I'm sure you've seen it, but it was pretty fun.
This is we got an Oxide and Friends regular contributor that's in High Noon. This is. Boy, you gotta talk about bearing the lead there. That's exciting.
Yeah,
let's go. The Tom Lyon anecdote alone.
Yeah, exactly.
On the subject of Tom, a book that Tom had recommended. I think the first time. So we should actually set the context a little bit. We did this originally almost 3 years ago, September of 2021. Sorry, that'd be almost 2 years ago. And then we did another one of these in June of last year. and this it turned out to be really interesting, and there were a lot of really good recommendations. Tom, in particular, had made the recommendation about What the Dormouse Said by John Markoff, and I had kind of been meaning to read that, Tom, and I finally got around to it. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, that was a great one. So thank you for that recommendation, Tom. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I don't realize I was in High Noon. I read it a long time ago, but I don't remember.
Tom, you're always been famous to us, but this is you're book famous. Great. And then Tom, you had sadly the making of the microchip is still where it was a year ago. So namely on my bookshelf where I look at it, it's
daunting volume.
It's daunting. Have you made any progress on it?
No, I just got through another book called A History of Silicon Valley by Piero Scaruffi. And it's a terrible book in that there's no plot or story or anything, but it's just knee deep in facts and figures. And it's fascinating. And it covers not just the computer side of things, but also biotech and military and cultural stuff. So it's pretty interesting.
And I feel like the biotech side of Silicon Valley is way too often forgotten. That there's this is also, Boston, I think, is rightfully thought of as kind of the historical epicenter of biotech. But San Francisco would be certainly in the running there. This is where obviously PCR was invented here. It's a great book actually on. Have you read the book on PCR? There's a great book on PCR.
No.
I had that ready years ago. Have you read this?
No.
Yeah.
Was it about the chemist who's really into drugs and stuff?
Yeah, it was the chemist who's really into drugs. That's the one. I'll go dig that one up because that was actually a great read and a good reminder of the kind of this area's role but that's as good. So not well structured, but worth reading nonetheless, it sounds like.
Yeah. It's a great place to dive in and then go Google about the stuff he's talking about. He also has no references, which is a drag. So it's a very strange book, but just thick with details.
The book that I was thinking of, by the way, is Making PCR, A Story of Biotechnology, 2011, which was really interesting history of PCR.
You were talking about the planets earlier. I should note that today is the anniversary of the water war between Sun Labs and Sunsoft.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Were you around for that, Brian?
I was not, but this is definitely handed down to me as oral tradition. So I would be very curious to fact check it. No, this predates me. But could you describe? Yeah.
I posted a link that has the raw footage. But it was this amazing war that was prepared for several weeks on both sides and included, helicopter support and God knows what else.
And this is Sun Labs.
All kinds of trebuchets and so it was basically between the Sun Labs building and the next building over, which was one of the Sunsoft buildings, and the little pond in between, and people marching back and forth and flinging water balloons and I actually didn't see it either. I was traveling for some reason, but
can I describe how this was handed down to me as kind of legend was, and I get very curious how accurate this is or was. And Ben Stoltz is there. Ben can weigh in as well. But so the way this was handed down to me is that it was Labs versus the operating system group versus Sunsoft. And over at Labs, you had these ridiculously ornate contraptions and a trebuchet that never quite worked correctly. And meanwhile, over at Sunsoft, they had just had the old surgical tube slingshot, and they were just doing enormous damage with just this very simple slingshot, kind of a 3 or 4 person slingshot, and they are just absolutely launching water balloons with deadly accuracy. And of course, this is the triumph of of the pragmatic guerrilla movement over the kind of the fancy labs trebuchet is the way that was. Is that at all? Is there any reality to that at all?
I don't recall who won or whatever. It was just a total melee. And at the time, we had a Russian au pair living with us who was taking care of our kids, and she was dating a guy in Sun Labs, and so she saw it and came back and reported it as like the most completely fucking insane thing she had ever seen.
It's still the stuff of legend. And that was how many years ago tonight? That was, you said?
1992. So
1992. Okay, so when I show up in 96, but it was definitely legendary. By the time I showed up.
The other great story I heard was that the Sun Labs guys got wind of Sunsoft hiring a helicopter. And so they got out their radio gear and they jammed all the frequencies so they couldn't coordinate with the helicopter.
Wow.
Wow. I guess
so
we're looking
at
pretty high tech. Also, I think emotions running pretty high is kind of that.
Yeah.
When you're calling it an airstrike, yeah, I think so.
You're calling it a literal airstrike, exactly. It's like, no, we're gonna jam their communications. They're like, is that civil aviation? Is this legal? Where sort
of counterinsurgency? What's going on?
Have we drifted into domestic terrorism here?
Yeah, I don't think any of that was legal. But...
That's pretty great. Well, another book that I actually, so as long as Ian, you're here. Because you made a recommendation that I also read that I loved, which was Cyberville by Stacey Horn, about the history of Echo. And Ian, I was wondering if did you actually read that? I know you'd recommended it. I think you'd started to read it last year.
Yeah, I read it after I recommended it to the
right. What did you think? I thought it was really interesting. I thought it was interesting because, so this is a well-like social network. This is like New York's equivalent of the Well. This is Echo. And I thought it was really interesting because I felt there was so much foreshadowing for what later happened to the internet and social networking where we saw this real dark side. Ian, what did you think?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of lessons learned that got relearned about 5 to 10 years later. And we could have avoided a lot of pain if more people had read this book that were involved in the next wave of social networks.
And Elon Musk, not too late. You could still figure out how social networking works. You could, because I feel like there's a lot of actually currency in there still today. So Ian, that was a great recommendation. Then I'd also read, although I'd done this a year ago, but the book on Blockbuster, which was absolutely terrific. And why is that title escaping me? I don't actually have it in front of me. It's Not Too Big to Fail. What is it? The Blockbuster book.
Yes. I can't remember either.
I'll dig that up. Yeah. That was another terrific book.
This was Built to Fail?
Built to Fail, exactly. Not Too Big to Fail. Very much Not Too Big to Fail. Yes, Built to Fail, which is a great book about, and that's where I learned. Is it HMB? Is that the grocery store in Texas? Am I remembering that right? No. What's the grocery store?
HEB.
HEB. Yeah, which was really extraordinary to learn about, and their kind of. Their execution, it sounds like they are every bit as good as this book made them out to be. It sounds like they're really an interesting grocery store. So the other book that I just took a very long time to get through, like on the order of many weeks, not months, to get through a book that I would highly recommend, a little book that no one's heard of called Moby Dick. I read Moby Dick, Adam. And have you read Moby Dick?
No, never read Moby Dick. Since you threatened to have this
I did.
This show
I did.
exclusively on Moby Dick.
I wanted to dedicate this show to Moby Dick. This is true.
That's right. I only got as far as downloading it onto my Kindle, but it's.
Well, to which your response was, "Are you concerned that we have too many listeners?"
Yes. Well, the best audience for my jokes is me, separated by a small amount of time.
So we will not dedicate the entire show to Moby Dick, but Moby Dick is extraordinary. It's really, really good. I think it's really outstanding. It's well written. It's got there's so much in there thematically. So the reason I know I'm now answering the question that no one's asked, but do you know how I got to Moby Dick?
Tell me.
Yeah, exactly. Do I have a choice? It doesn't feels like a very rhetorical question.
Let's get it out. Yeah.
So when we were, and I'm curious if you heard me use whaling as a metaphor. I would use whaling as a metaphor.
Yes, absolutely. And you, in particular, around hard tech investing, I think.
Yes, that's right. That hard tech investing is that you're going whaling, and in particular, there was one VC firm in particular that was really a poor fit that should not be investing in hard tech because they haven't done any. All they've done is software. And I was telling them, it's like, you need to fish from the pier. We're going whaling. Which I intended to like tell them why they are not a fit. Unfortunately, it made them desire Oxide, or thought they desired Oxide a lot more. They thought I was like, this isn't a negotiation tactic. I'm telling you, like, there's a lot that's like not great about whaling. But this idea that like you're on this, because I think it's amazing that you'd go on this multi-year journey. But at the back of my head, I'm like, how over my skis am I on this one? I don't actually know that much about whaling. And I was talking to a friend of mine who is super into whaling. And I was asking her, like, what would be the book to read on whaling? She's like, the book to read on whaling is Moby Dick. Like, that is the book to read on whaling. And she's like, I got the edition for you. So you want to get the Arian Press edition. This was a handcrafted edition of which they only made 250 copies, but you can now buy a reproduction of this for whatever, $10. And it's amazing. So like they developed their own, it's all the hand press custom font and everything. So the edition is amazing, but the book is just incredible. And there's a lot you can say about Moby Dick, but I feel like there's, in all the analyses I've read, there's one piece that was missing, namely Herman Melville is super, super into whaling. That's just a very important detail. Like, this guy is really into whaling. And you just learn a lot, I think, about, and I would say that like I come away with having more conviction than ever that this is actually a good metaphor for a startup, because you are going whaling, you're going on this multi-year journey, you are kind of getting your crew, you're getting together, and then you're taking this extraordinary risk, although not to life or limb, but to go to venture out. And in a whaling ship, the crew actually has a slice of the profits called the lay in a whaling ship. And perhaps like a startup, they tends to not be worth very much. That's the so you kind of chase that metaphor as much as you want. But a really good book. I think it's a really good book, and I think it's like funny. I laughed out loud a bunch. I also think it's a absolute waste to inflict this on anyone who is like certainly younger than 30. I would say younger than 40. Like, certainly no high school student should need to read Moby Dick, because you're a child. Like, this book has nothing for you. Like, you don't actually the deep resonance of this book you're not going to have until you have a lot more life experience. This is what I have to say. Education's wasted on the young.
Can you share what you shared about Moby with me?
Oh,
I know that this is
that Moby, the artist.
Yes.
Is this is like, when this is the other reason to read Moby Dick. It's like you get into the Moby Dick club, and now there are all these Moby Dick references that you get. Oh, by the way, okay, one thing I am not doing, by the way, I am not spoiling the ending for you. And there is like, we just don't seem like there's this idea that, like, I don't know, it's written in the 19th century, anyone can spoil the ending for anyone else. It's like, come on, there's no, and so I was watching, and you feel like, nothing is safe. I was watching Major League with my 16-year-old, because we view it as a documentary about the Oakland A's. We'll leave that aside. But so we're watching Major League, a movie made in the 80s that has a very explicit Moby Dick spoiler in it.
Oh,
and in
delightful.
Particular, there's like, because I know the love story in Major League. What do you mean you don't recall the love story in Major League, Adam? There's a love story in Major League. And in particular, the catcher needs to prove his
Yeah,
love.
Crash Davis. You're right.
Isn't Crash
Right?
Davis?
Oh no, I've got Bull Durham. I'm sorry, that's Bull Durham. Pardon me.
Also a great book, or also a great movie. But but the catcher needs to prove his love by reading Moby Dick, and she asks him an extremely specific question about the ending while I'm reading Moby Dick. I'm like, Jesus Christ, you literally just ruined the actual ending for me. Anyway, I'm not ruining the ending. I'm not gonna I think people casually. This is an ending that I feel is famously spoiled, and I'm not going to spoil it. So that's all I'm going to say.
Well, and this is an important pro tip along with read Moby Dick, which is don't also watch Major League. So hold off for a few months on watching Major League. If you're planning that.
I don't know how many people have been reading Moby Dick, being on the edge of their seat reading Moby Dick while they're watching Major League, but I'm just saying it happened to me.
It's really a pretty small, I think a small club.
It feels like a small club. It feels like a small club, and I'm in it, and I'm writing a letter right now to the producers of Major League. Dear sir or madam, I trust this letter finds you well. But you're asking about, so Moby, the artist, is the great nephew of Herman Melville. So changes his name to Moby. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, or at least according to his Wikipedia page, claims to be. But that's good enough for me. I trust Moby.
And there were a bunch of Simpsons references in Moby Dick. And now, it may be fair to say there are a bunch of Moby Dick references in The Simpsons, but it felt like there were a bunch of...
That's right. For me, The Simpsons is canon and Moby Dick is derivative.
Moby Dick is just wow, how did they crib The Simpsons, 140 years beforehand? But from hell's heart, I stab at thee, Springfield.
Nice.
Anyway, really good book. And it takes a while to get through because it is so dense. The dude is super into whales, and you're just Googling all the time because I just felt like there's so much stuff that I'm like, what even is this? And also, although it's where there are things that I've never heard of, and I would run it by Bridget. I'm like, have you ever heard of ambergris? She's like, yeah, of course. The ambergris, absolutely. And then it kind of rattles off a bunch of things about ambergris. Do you know anything about ambergris, Adam?
Isn't that made from whale blubber?
Jesus, am I the only one that doesn't okay.
But Bridget and I were both raised. You were raised in coastal cities, so maybe that's it.
Yes. Is there some mandatory whaling class in the Connecticut curriculum? Maybe that would actually.
Well, there used to be.
There used to be. When they got rid of the Hartford Whalers, they also got rid of the mandatory course requirement.
Too soon.
No, fair enough. But now I really want to go to New Bedford. This is like a gateway drug. I'm getting super into whaling. So that really highly recommended. Great book. And I think that there's also a bunch of people that I've read because I threw this out there on the internet. A bunch of people are like, yeah, this is a great book. It's the best ever. This actually prompted me to read another book that I absolutely raced through that I could not put down on endurance. On Shackleton's. What do you know about Shackleton? Or no Shackleton?
Zero. I even though you've mentioned Shackleton to me within the last few weeks, I feel like I've already dropped back to zero.
So I was like, Shackleton, I don't know, Antarctica, stranded, made it back. That's kind of what I knew about Shackleton. Didn't really know much detail. Alfred Lansing wrote this book in the 50s, 1957 or something like this, on Shackleton. Amazing. This story is crazy. I mean, it's got to be the best survival story ever because, and I don't feel this is a spoiler because this is something I feel is well known about Shackleton. They all survive, and they survive despite the absolute longest odds. And this book, Endurance, was just a page ripper. And I wish my kids were. I would read it aloud. This might be a read aloud to a younger kid. To Joshua, maybe it is.
I mean, okay, it looks like it's not that long. It looks like that's a month or whatever. Yeah, cool.
And I think that it would be I wish my kids were a bit younger. I'd read it aloud to them. I think it's that good. So that's what I gotta say.
Huh. Nice.
So there you go. I think I'm done. I just had to get the Nautical books right out of my system, and I feel that we basically did a good job. So I'm sorry. I'm done now. With that particular theme.
So can I pile onto the nautical theme?
Go pile onto the nautical theme. Yes, please.
Okay, I posted this one for you on Mastodon, but I actually managed to make it to the call today despite not picking out it. I hope my audio quality is okay.
It is
but I
good.
wanted
Aren't
to
you at sea right now?
Yes, I am literally at sea off the coast of Baja, but Starlink is holding up right now. So
That's amazing.
it's a brave new world. But I apologize for engine noise. So I wanted to recommend Into the Raging Sea by Rachel Slade. And it is a work of an investigative journalism about the sinking of the USS El Faro in 2015, which was the first loss of a U.S. merchant marine vessel since like the early 80s or something like that. And it is both haunting because it pulls heavily from the recovered black box recordings from the bridge of the ship, including, I believe, all the dialogue from the last chapter is taken verbatim from the black box, but also fascinating in the investigation of both the proximate and the systemic issues that resulted in this ship being lost and 33 people being lost at sea. The cultural factors in the merchant marine, the great sexism and classism and racism, the economic factors that cause shipping companies to be pushed to run leaner and leaner and leaner, cut corners everywhere we can. The technological factors in terms of like people relying on systems that present pretty pictures over systems that are actually more accurate. It's fascinating and heartbreaking, and I recommend it to everybody.
Yeah, this book looks great. I'd never heard of it until your recommendation on Mastodon yesterday, and this looks really terrific. So, yeah, I'm not done with my nautical theme. I think this is going to be the next one I add to it. But it really looks like a terrific book. And so,
also, I look forward to your review next year.
Yeah, and do you do you read maritime disaster books while at sea? I mean, I definitely admire that.
Sometimes I find it's a really good way to fill time. There was a while, maybe about 10 years ago, where I read the Wikipedia index of shipwrecks by year, which is really actually shockingly interesting. You also learn that all these merchant marine ships, like, they never die. Like, they're built for one company for a purpose, but then they just sell it on to somebody else. So all these ships are floating around like 80 years old or something, right? With long, complicated histories.
Yeah, I definitely, I could. I mean, that's a deep Wikipedia black hole. Did you find the root cause of the HMS Comfort? By the way, this is something that has bothered me. Did you do this?
I'm familiar with that.
This is the container ship that broke into two, and then one half of it like burst into fire. And I wanted to like does a ship? And this is like the bow was separated from the stern. Like literally, the ship cracks into two. These are two wholly separate parts, and the bow portion of this container vessel bursts into flames. And I'm like, look, like, I'm not a maritime engineer, but does that seem normal to everybody? Like, would you expect fire? And I could not get like the final accident report or whatever, and no one seems to care. No one died. So it's like, there's like, whatever, it's a massive loss of property.
Speaking as someone on a boat right now, like, fire is one of the most dangerous things that can happen to you on a boat, which is counterintuitive. But if you think about it, like, there's nowhere to go if there's a fire.
Yeah. One of my favorite, like, you get one of these little, like, Discovery Channel documentaries, the Fire at Sea documentary is just, like, absolutely terrifying. Yeah, fires are very, very bad news.
Yeah. If you want another Wikipedia black hole on a nautical thing to go down, look up the Halifax explosion, which was a cargo ship loaded with TNT during the First World War that exploded in Halifax Harbor and took a large portion of the city with it.
Boy, and didn't start a war. It wasn't used as a cause for America to go. I'm sorry, I'm amazed that the U.S. didn't use that as a cause to invade another country. I mean, isn't that the way those things generally rolled at that time?
No. But when newspapers were writing about the first atomic bomb, they compared it to the Halifax explosion.
Wow. Yeah, that is okay. Yeah, that is a good Wikipedia black hole. That's great. Good stuff. That's a great recommendation.
Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, Ian, do you have some good recommendations for us?
Yeah, right now I'm reading If Then, How the Simulmatics Corporation Invented the Future. Which I don't know if you, which is by Jill Lepore. I don't know if you've seen this one or heard about it.
No, tell me about it.
It's about this corporation that lasts for about 11 years. It's founded in 1959 and it closes its doors in 1970. And they are doing very early work on voter data collection and kind of application of computers to social sciences to try and predict how voters will behave in an election. So they're looking at the, I think, 64 election was the first one that they really came into view on the JFK campaign. Yeah, it seemed like a pretty, high-profile flame out where it kind of burnt bright and not for very long, and has some pretty interesting ties to the politics that were happening in that kind of 10-year period, as well as just like computing in the Northeast, where some of the work was done out of MIT and on the early time-sharing systems that were in MIT, and the invention of email, or like early days of email, were in that same like kind of tied in with this. Yeah, pretty interesting so far. I'm about, I don't know, 2/3 of the way through at the moment.
Yeah, this looks really good. And does this go in? What was the election in which Univac was able to? Am I remembering this correctly? And maybe did they talk about this in the book where Univac was used to predict? Is it the 1960 election?
Yeah,
I can't remember the
exactly.
details of that.
And I think that they talk a bit about how computers make their way into the newsrooms of the TV stations at the time and start, predicting results based on early returns. And then this kind of, the part that I'm kind of up to is the New York Times enter into a contract with this corporation with Simulmatics to be able to do some similar sorts of reporting, and they get some IBM mainframes installed, and hilarity ensues where they were not as competent as they seemed to indicate early on to the New York Times. So pretty interesting stuff, and some kind of US history that I'm not super well versed in.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It was 1952, as a couple of people pointing out in the chat. There was the 1952 election. This looks great. How do you find what to read? I just feel that you've had so many great recommendations for us that I've just never heard of before. Like, how do you get the next thing to read?
Ian, are you seeing other podcasts? Is that what's going on?
Exactly. When we said that we were in an open relationship, we really didn't expect that you would be going to other podcasts. I don't know. This is.
I think this one may have been an Amazon recommendation, going down the deep black hole, which is like similar items, and you're clicking through a few times before you find something that's like actually good. I did end up picking this book up in person in Portland when I went to Powell's.
Yeah.
And that has some good stuff there.
Yeah, I've never actually been physically to Powell's. I've bought books from them online, but was it great? Was it as good as I imagine? I imagine it's a huge bookstore, right?
It's massive. It's absolutely massive, and there is a wall which is like historical business fiction, which I spent a good, 30 minutes poring over all the titles and managed to restrain myself to buying only a couple of books because it was.
Did you say historical business fiction?
Yeah.
So like historical fiction, but based on
the kinds of stuff that we've been talking about on this podcast is like
but nonfiction, right?
Nonfiction. Sorry, yeah.
Nonfiction. Okay, that makes more sense. I was like,
I was going to be very excited for this genre. Yeah,
that's a small demographic.
Alternative histories, yeah, that could be a fun one.
Right. What if Sun had bought Apple?
Yeah, and it's like it's right next to the business erotica section. Did you see that? Like that gets even weirder. By the way.
I thought we weren't going to talk about that one.
That's right. That sounds. Yeah, I mean, I love that. That sounds great. And so that you got If Then there.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
Then, not the best title. That's a little bit of a rough title, but it's I bought a copy, so Ian, you could recommend pretty much anything. I think I would. You got a very high hit rate. I've really enjoyed your recommendations. Do you? Speaking of which, do you have any others? I mean, is that?
Yeah, I've got a couple others for today.
Oof.
I would note that I haven't read this one because it just got released, but John Romero just released his autobiography, Doom
Is that
Guy
already
Life in
out?
First Person.
Yeah,
I thought that's coming out.
Yeah.
Oh, is it out like this week?
Yeah, it came out like, I don't know, on the 18th, so less than a week ago.
And Masters of Doom, I have not read. That's definitely on the queue. You've read Masters of Doom, right, Adam? And you really enjoyed it, I think.
Yeah, and I've been waiting for Romero's rebuttal for a while now.
Yeah, Masters of Doom is definitely an excellent read, and I would recommend that as well.
Yeah, very fun, especially for folks who kind of grew up on Doom and that genre and that kind of era of computing and video games.
Wolfenstein 3D.
Yeah, exactly. I'm really very much looking forward to hearing what Romero has to say, just because he's not portrayed in the most flattering light.
Yeah, this looks good. And so this is just out now. Ian, have you read this, or have you got this on the way? I guess.
Yeah,
literally.
I downloaded it to my Kindle, but not read it, so it's in the same state as Moby Dick for Adam, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like your likelihood of reading Doom Guy is higher than Adam's of reading Moby Dick. Adam, am I disparaging you? I'm sorry.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
And then I've got one more for today. This one is called From Secret Ballot to Democracy Sausage, How Australia Got Compulsory Voting.
Oh, that's interesting. So
this is not in the usual set of things that we talk about in this podcast, but it is about how the voting system in Australia changed over time to be able to evolve to get both compulsory voting, but also it talks about the women's suffrage movement in Australia, and the two are kind of tied together in many ways. And yeah, it's pretty fascinating stuff, particularly like looking at how the US system and the Australia system are both kind of reactions to the problems at the point in time that they split off from the UK system. And that, both of them are kind of reactions to the problems that they saw at the time. And from that framing is kind of interesting.
That looks really interesting. And Ian, have you read The Fatal Shore?
No, I haven't.
Oh, The Fatal Shore is so good. The Fatal Shore. This is by Robert Hughes. Outstanding book on the history of Australia. I have tried to get more or less every Australian I know to read it, but no Australian I know has read it. And Adam, do you recall this was on the book list for our wedding? Do you remember this?
I don't remember your wedding having a book list, so that's on me. I apologize.
I feel like you are like most of our wedding goers in that you I kind of faded out by page 3 of that letter you sent. So yeah, I don't know. If there's a book list at the end of it, I definitely missed it. I had perhaps ill-advised idea that we had a bunch of Americans going to Australia for our wedding, and wanted to. It's easy for Americans to not appreciate that Australia is a different country with a very, very different history. And the history is super important. I mean, it is everywhere. And so, we put together a reading list that, again, don't worry, no one else paid attention to either. But The Fatal Shore was first among them because The Fatal Shore is a really, really good book. And Ian, this looks great. The Secret Ballot. Yeah.
Brian, I read Fatal Shore too. My favorite part of that was the story about the guy who escapes from Australia and joins some ship and ends up going all the way around the Pacific up through Japan and back to North America and down somewhere, and then they recapture him and take him back to Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because the system of transportation, which is the Australia being used, and which is is super complicated, and you have a lot of people that are being transported that don't deserve it, and then you've got a people who are being transported who really do deserve it, as it turns out, and Adam, a bunch of them actually. There's a group that escaped, came to San Francisco, and started burning down San Francisco. So there's
we don't like that here, right?
I believe it was the Sydney Coves or the Sydney Ducks, some gang that had what I felt at the time was not a very menacing gang name. I don't know. I feel like, but yeah, Tom, I loved The Fatal Shore. I thought that was a great book.
Yeah, it was a long time ago for me, so I don't remember too much.
If you're going to Australia and you would like our reading list, you could be the first person to read the books on it. Or even read the reading list. I don't think. I should have quizzed people on just the contents of the reading list. I'm not even asking you to read the books.
You know how I know that I forgot about the reading list is because I didn't bring it up in every conversation when I've ever introduced you to anyone. This is the guy who had a reading list for his wedding. Is what I would have started every sentence with.
So you're saying really it is a blessing that people did not make it to that final page. Yeah, it's true. No one has actually given me grief about the reading list or indeed said anything about the reading list. So maybe maybe everyone just like faded out. Maybe no one even got there. Maybe no one even
it's
read
his
the reading
day.
list.
We should be kind, right?
It's his day. Right. I guess the other possibility is that everyone's like, oh, wait a minute, is this reading list guy? Yeah, that's reading list guy. Yeah, you're right. He got going on Moby Dick, and I thought I was stranded on a whaler. I thought I was yeah. All right, look. Some things have changed. Ian, those are great.
I think there's now multiple people asking for the reading list to be posted, so make sure that makes it to the show notes at the very least.
Oh, my Australian reading list. All right, I will. You know what? I will. Thank you, Internet. Someone wants my reading list, and I will. This is where like the grand reveal is. Bridget's like, I destroyed every copy of that thing that was. I married you despite the reading list, like not the.
She's like, no, you sent it to me. I just didn't send it out to anyone.
Right. But I gave you the reading list to send to the guests, and like, yes, and I know, and I told you I did it because I know what's best for you.
Our whole relationship is founded on a lie.
Founded on a lie of the reading list that was never sent. That included actually a bunch of great books, but Peter Carey book, which is terrific, Leviathan, a bunch of good stuff. Book on the dismissal, which is like an extremely hard book to find, but the dismissal is when the Governor General actually dismissed Parliament in Australia. All sorts of interesting things about Australia that you could learn if you read the reading list. But yeah,
I think I speak for the entire internet when I say I can't wait.
Yeah, right, exactly. I can't wait to make fun of you for this. Yes, please post to the internet. This is like Alexander's made a podcast, and he won't share it with me. Even though he's like, it's genius, but no. And he's like, but Tobin, his older brother, is super into it. He wants me to send him like every episode. I'm like, are you certain that he's not making fun of you for it? Like, are you certain he's not wanting you to send him this podcast to mock you mercilessly?
Yeah, knife's edge on that one, right?
Yeah. Ian, those are great recommendations. Thank you very much. Did any others? Did we get the
I think that's about it. Yeah, I would +1 on Tom's recommendation of Psalm for the Wild Built, the first in the Monk and Robot series. It's a light read, but it's fun. And
where was that dropped in the chat? Where is that?
Yeah, it was. Tom dropped it in the chat. It's by Becky Chambers. Yeah, it's a good read.
It's about a tea brewing monk and his adventures with a wild built robot.
All right, yeah. I need to. This is, I assume, science fiction, which I keep trying to find the right entree into. I'm just not a science fiction person, but it's not a point of principle. All right. Is that Philip O.V.? Do you have some?
Yes. Let's see if I can get all the way through this without crashing, but like mentally, because I had to load the entire context, at least some interesting context from this book, into my brain between my workday and now. I'm going to be talking about Barbarians Led by Bill Gates, which
Oh, yeah.
That seems like a pretty tortured pun on Barbarians at the Gates, which I'm sure came up as a phrase. I'm not sure if on the side of Microsoft or on the side of the DOJ in the early Microsoft days, like 80s, 90s, early. I mean,
Well, and is it a pun on the Barbarians at the Gate book about Argento, which is a terrific book, by the way, about Argento Nabisco and private equity? Anyway,
you're already going far deeper than I have, because I mean, I've been, as far as I'm kind of going on a Microsoft history binge. I kind of have to.
Okay.
And like Overdrive, Showstopper, they've all been podcasted to death, so I can just listen my way through those instead of having to read my way through those. But this one's kind of niche. I found it for like $6 at a half price books, and in Redmond, obviously, because where else do you get niche Microsoft titles? And it's like a loose collection of stories, it all put together with the objective of, okay, back in the day when the DOJ was clamping down on Microsoft, this book was written as a weird, like, reverse hit piece where they're like, okay, everybody's going to think that Microsoft, Bill Gates and everybody, they're so Machiavellian, they're so evil. They always have everything calculated. This book was like, wait. They're all idiots. And they were all just barely getting by. They had no plan. They're all mad, all no plan over there. So we're just going to write about all the dysfunction in there, and hopefully this proves that Microsoft is defensible against the DOJ just because they weren't planning to be this evil. It just happened that way, right? Very, very funny premise for a book.
Yeah, an interesting tack.
There is so much. I mean, it's not like the stories are all in one cohesive order and there's one big payoff. Like, I think they jump across time a little bit. But one interesting one I think that you'll like in the Cantarilla-verse is that, and you in particular, the reason, DOS robbed you of your childhood, right? No memory protection. They had memory protection on those CPUs, right? But they never used it, right?
That's correct. Okay.
So you know how they finally got memory protection into Windows 3.0. Of course, it seems like from this book, Microsoft was still so completely unsure of what their strategy was for the next operating system while dealing with IBM, right? Are we going to deal with IBM Top View? What's their strategy for OS2? The history of these operating systems and how they're going to deal with each other, it's a lot less clear cut than I thought it was. I'm Gen Z, so I have no perspective on this. Okay, they found a professor who had written a debugger, a scroll screen trace debugger, and they took interest in this debugger. They brought him on, this guy named Sargent, and he started working with his debugger. I don't know if it was his. Yeah, I guess he kept using that debugger. He just debugged his way through a prototype of Windows 3.0 that could take all the programs that were never designed to run in protected mode and run in protected mode. So he used a debugger, your favorite thing, to get through non-protected mode, your least favorite thing.
That's pretty funny. I wonder, what was the name of the debugger? Do you know?
The one that he was recognized for was SST, the Scroll Screen Tracer debugger. Again, I had like 5 minutes to scroll through. I think he kept using that debugger to find and squash all the bugs. And at that point, it's another one of those stories. It's like the IBM PC, right? If they knew how big of a deal this was going to be, they would have just put a ton of people on it and it would have fallen over. But they got this professor in. He sneakily made this protected memory prototype. And just because he was able to get it in under the radar meant that, finally, we can now present it to management and be like, here's our case to go forth.
So do I infer correctly? Do you work for Microsoft? I assume you work for Microsoft.
I do.
And
I was praying that I do not get pinged on call while telling this story.
Right. And so for you, is the evil Microsoft, is that like, because that must feel like otherworldly at this point.
No,
it's kind of like
absolutely. So I only get traces and hints of it because the people I came around while growing up were all the parents were like 40-year-old Microsoft. Like, what happens when you take all those evil jackasses and they turn 40 or 50 or 60, and then what are those personalities, right? They usually don't
it
all
turns out they
remain.
find
So,
like they try to cure tuberculosis or whatever. I mean, Gates seems to have been kind of like now has like redeeming qualities. So I feel that, although actually
not
maybe
all
now
of
with the
them
divorce,
not all of them fly off from the east side. Some of them are only millionaires instead of billionaires, so they live around here, right? So I only got that culture, and of course, Microsoft pushes all this open source stuff, which I love, by the way.
which is crazy to
I
think that.
love
I
this
mean,
stuff. And
it's good. It is. It's great. And in fact, we were talking about Playwright last week, right? And it's
That's right.
amazing. And it is a Microsoft tool, open source Microsoft tool. So no, it's been. I mean, Microsoft. It is amazing how much has culturally changed from when this book is written in 1998, which is really kind of the peak of it. I've got another book suggestion for you, actually. If you are at Microsoft and you're interested in kind of understanding that era, a book.
There we
I don't know
go.
if you. Actually, no. This is a great book, Startup by Jerry Kaplan. Have you read this, Adam?
Yeah, it's been a minute. I think it actually was given to me along with the Barbarians led by Bill Gates by relatives who didn't know what to get me for Hanukkah some years, but it's been a long time.
It's worth a reread. I had read it this was a book that came out in 1995. I read it when I first came out to Silicon Valley in 1996, but I had not read it since. And Jerry Kaplan has started a tablet company called Go, which makes it now not Go the programming language, Go the company. And it is a really, really, really good read. And then
yes, this came up in Barbarians. The Go if I'm not this was the writing tablet Go, right?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Okay, this book has an entire chapter of them just Microsoft getting so distracted with the one goal of just fucking over Go with 10 windows. And it's like, good job, everybody. You did it. You wrote the thing that obsoletes Go. They're not a concern on the market, and nobody cares about it.
Yes. And
good
so
job, guys.
Startup is basically a retelling of that from Kaplan's perspective. And it does feel like very directed of like and this is kind of the era of, this is before the findings of fact, and they were kind of with impunity. They would kind of announce that they're doing something to destroy a startup, and it was really felt very stifling. But it's definitely an interesting. It will it will pair well with
it's stuff.
Barbarians
It's stuff like this that I don't. I never like the point of view that people have about, oh man, Google is just not successful at all. I wish Google were successful. If Google became the next Microsoft, we would have this whole 30 years of evil replayed on the web. And it's very important to not have companies so evil that they go out of their way to screw over startups and then get nothing out of it.
Yes, Microsoft was pretty bad behavior in the late 90s, and we were well served by the DOJ ultimate findings of fact, and I think they really cooled their jets honestly after that, and then they kind of went into their own.
I don't know how I didn't connect these dots earlier, but it's only super super recently that I realized that the "Don't be evil" motto that Google used to have, it wasn't some moral stance that they were keeping internally about let's all do nice things for the that was just subtle marketing to be anti-Microsoft, because back then,
yes,
if you said evil in the context of software, of course you're talking about Microsoft. My generation does not get that now. I did not get that.
No, and it's
you just say evil and Microsoft.
Well, and this is like a big wake-up call when we were trying to hire someone who was trying to decide between Giant at the time, Microsoft and Facebook, and went to Facebook, and all of the younger millennials were. My reaction is like, well, at least he didn't go to Microsoft, so I can still like have some respect for him. And he's like, what are you talking about? Microsoft's a fine company. The fact that he went to Facebook, like, I'm disgusted. Like, I actually thought higher of him than that. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, Facebook is the one.
I will confirm that this is the view now. That if you go to, I had an offer for Meta before I got Microsoft.
100%. And this was in 2016 when it was, and I feel like I was kind of late to that realization. And but yes, it was very clear that like that Facebook had really lost their way, and I mean, justifiably, younger folks thought of Facebook the way I had thought of Microsoft, and for good reason, as it turns out. The kids are all right. The kids were right about that one.
Yeah, and my last dig at Microsoft will be, I am starting my own timer to see when device script will be mentioned in a podcast, because that is definitely up the same alley as hubris, and we will see where that goes, especially with your node marriage and divorce. I'm waiting.
Okay, well, I mean, obviously you've sent us device script now. I'd not heard of it until now, so we're gonna your timer. Stop your timer right now.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
I'm sorry if I rabbit hole this and put us so deeply over time. I'll just say this before leaving. TypeScript on microcontrollers. That is it.
Yeah.
This looks wild. This looks wild.
This has got Ultra Java overtones, Adam.
Yeah, speaking of old school Sun, absolutely.
Pico Java in the planets. Oh, God. Yeah. And Adam, I know you're going to have to disappear in short orders because you've been away from home. So,
well, then before I do, I have one other book that I've been really enjoying that I am listening to. I feel, as you know, I feel the need
don't
to
stop
confess
being
that.
dirty about it. No, like every time you say listen to a book, you apologize. There's no reason to apologize.
That's right. So I'm listening to Chernow's Washington. I loved Hamilton, just like everyone does. But and the reason I got there was I had like credits on Audible that were going away, and I was like, "What is the longest book I can get for the fewest credits?" And it is like 40.
Fucking Dick.
No, no. This is longer. Moby Dick was 24 hours. This is 41.
Okay, move over, Moby Dick.
There you go. Exactly. Step aside. And I think fascinating. That time period is obviously fascinating, but I think the things. The discussion of slavery in the founding, very nuanced discussion of that. Washington's views were really interesting, surrounded by Hamilton and other aides de camp, and became much more progressive, sort of in their, in that military family, which was really interesting to see how, for him, the youth was influencing him in a much more progressive direction. But the other big sort of surprise or thing that I didn't quite appreciate was the degree to which, he needed to make sure everyone understood that he was not going to be a monarch, because people didn't understand forms of government that were not monarchies. So people are like, oh, okay, wait, I guess we have a president. I guess that's sort of like a king, right? And it was really important that he had no children, that he and Martha Washington have no children of their own. So in a lot of ways, he was a safe pick for president, because there were no he had no sons to like marry off to royalty off in Europe. But
that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway,
I recommend it though. It sounds like.
And much more. I mean, that's like 30 seconds of the 41 hours. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it.
I love Chernow.
Yeah, exactly. And apparently there's a bunch of new scholarship about Washington. So it's not just a retread, but there was, new, I think it was written in 2010, but new as of then. So, it wasn't just sifting over what other folks had already written, but actually a bunch of new stuff that had not been woven into a narrative.
I have to say, the other reason I love Hamilton and Chernow is to put TJ back in his place. Thomas Jefferson, I'm not a Thomas Jefferson fan. And you know what? I love the fact that Hamilton basically hates his guts and views him as a chicken, and calls him out on his own hypocrisy, on talking a mean game on liberty and then being an unapologetic slaveholder.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously very nuanced on Washington too, where he had very little money. Like he kept up this appearance of having tons of money and didn't want to sell off slaves, but anyway, very complicated, conflicted, and all of these declarations about liberty, have a very sour taste when you have massive slaveholders running the government.
That's great.
Yeah, it's a great one. Really enjoying it.
That is awesome. And Adam, if Jeff, the wolf with the pacifier, will stay if you.
Yes, don't
you
worry.
have the drop, right?
Craig is in for the long haul.
Craig's in for the long haul. Craig is like, tell me more about that reading list. I want to go back to that Australian reading list. I was just riveted, edge of my seat.
Yeah.
Mikowski, do you have some books for us? Go for it. We can't hear you, or I can't hear you. But Discord may be going split brain. I don't know.
No,
Adam,
the green circle isn't appearing on Discord, so that means the problem is between Mikowski and Discord. Oh.
How about now?
How about now? There we go.
Hey, sorry. First time listener, or long time listener, first time caller, so I apologize for that. I actually just snuck out of my office to tell you guys about these books, so I'm going to be super quick. But I have an elevator pitch for 2 different titles that kind of come from the sort of Cantrillian world of like organizational behavior that leads to terrible engineering outcomes. The first is California Burning by, I believe it's Catherine Blunt. I don't have my notes in front of me. She's a Wall Street Journal reporter, and that is a deep dive into the history of PG&E, so both the history of electricity coming to San Francisco and California, but then also the incentives and the organizational behavior and other things that led them to accidentally blow up San Bruno and then burn down Paradise, California. The like teaser fact I guess I'll share from that one is there's a great sort of metaphor for tech debt in your engineering projects. I think there in that much of the problems that PG&E has had in the past few decades have been coming from the fact that they are financially incentivized to build new things and not to maintain old things. And that is a theme that runs throughout their history. I don't know if anyone's already read that one, but I would definitely recommend that for any tech leader or engineer.
Yeah, this looks really, really good. Great recommendation. Yeah.
And then the second one, and I'm going to run back to my cube, is it's called Command and Control by Eric Schlosser. And that is,
yeah.
Oh, you know this one. Okay, cool. So you can probably tell it better than me. I guess my quick synopsis or pitch for it would be it's both the history of the American nuclear arsenal, so it walks you through like the early days, and then it kind of speed walks you to the 80s, which is when the actual incident occurred. And the acute thing that happened was a technician accidentally dropped a wrench and blew up an ICBM in Arkansas in the United States. But that's not even a spoiler because the real story is the fact that we didn't actually accidentally have a nuclear detonation in our Cold War history as a nation, and just sort of a recount of like all of the lessons learned and sometimes lessons that we should have learned but didn't, related to how we designed for safety in our nuclear armaments. And also, I would say there's even like a debugging line in there because as their missile silo is on fire and they don't know what's going on, they realize that like all of the systems they had designed to make it safe were not working. So really good read there. And I think both of those titles are.
Lost you. Or those.
Sorry about that. My phone
No
locked on
worries.
me. I was just ending with, I think both of those titles are fairly accessible, not overly wonky. So I would definitely encourage, like, I tell my teams, my software teams to take a look at them as well. Really broadly applicable lessons.
Totally agreed. And I actually read Command and Control after Atomic Accidents. So I'm not sure if you read Atomic Accidents. Atomic Accidents is a great book that surveys essentially every atomic accident that happened in the U.S. And it is remarkable. Steve, if you read this is like, we came remarkably close to nuking South Carolina. Can you imagine if we had nuked South Carolina?
Seems bad.
But it's like, can you imagine? There's no way to be like, oh, sorry, that was us nuking South Carolina. They'd be like, Soviets, oopsie. What? Right? Yeah. You know, they'd be like, well, now we have to also nuke. Funny story, but now we have to nuke Moscow as well, or we're going to have to own the fact that we nuked. I mean, it is just absolutely wild that we got so lucky, and in some of these accidents, just extraordinarily lucky. And there are actually in some of these accidents, we actually didn't blow something up because something failed. If something had actually operated as designed, we would have actually nuked ourselves. So, but Command and Control is a great book. And I love the California burning. That's I have not read also is Smartest Guys in the Room, which I've been it's been on the list for quite some time. So it wasn't this one. The Arkansas is it is a Titan missile, if I'm remembering correctly. It's a silo that and the wrench is dropped down the silo, and the book is also just all about the engineering of the silo, which is super complicated, as one might imagine.
Have you been to the Titan II museum near Tucson?
No, it's interesting. Oh, interesting.
You can go in a silo, and it's got the whole thing. So it's really highly recommended.
Interesting. And have you read Command and Control? Tom, you would love Command and Control if you haven't read it.
No, I have not.
Yeah, it's really good. Especially if you've got any interest in Titan, you would love it. All right. Did I go through all my... I mentioned Creative Capital last time about George Doriot, great book on one of the first venture capitalists. And I imagine, Adam, you've taken off at this point, but another one that I actually really liked after the, Steve Jobs and the Next Big Thing, which a bunch of us read by Randall Strauss. I'm like, I gotta just go read more books by Randall Strauss. And I read E-Boys, terrible title, by Randall Strauss about the history of benchmark capital, which I really enjoyed and I definitely recommend.
Now there has to be an E-Boy VC firm. Like, is that not just so there can be another book with that title?
And it's kind of funny because I get the sense that I think the book is pretty well researched, but I think Benchmark's a little uncomfortable with the book. The Benchmark Capital is really interesting. Actually, Steve, one of the things that's funny about Benchmark is, there are a bunch of things that we've done at Oxide that we think, okay, no one has we've got a uniform compensation across Oxide, which things totally radical, and then you realize that actually Benchmark Capital does the same thing. And actually, as it turns out, there are actually quite a few high-performing teams that did these same kinds of things, which is definitely interesting. And Ian is also recommending the Benchmark, the podcast on Acquired. Acquired is a great podcast, and they did an Acquired on Benchmark that is really worth listening to. And yeah, if you, someone was saying, I listened to the Acquired on Benchmark and then bought E-Boys. E-Boys I thought was great. I thought it was a really good read. I mean, Randall Strauss is a great author, and it is mainly about eBay, which is kind of the reason he called it E-Boys. Which, again, terrible title. Really call it literally anything else. But it's pretty interesting because eBay was just absolutely minting money early, and is a no-brainer from a VC perspective because they are immediately profitable. But the way they operate as a firm is really pretty interesting. And then let's see, what else did we talked about losing the signal? That was which was fun. That was folks didn't get a chance to listen to that. And recommending the sibling podcast to Acquired called Founders. I'll have to check that out. Acquired is a great podcast. Steve? Do you have any book recommendations?
So I have one book that I'm reading, and by reading I mean I'm reading it really slow, but I am part of the way through it, but I've enjoyed it a lot so far. Is The Color of Law: A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America. And it's and what's really interesting about it too is it starts off by saying the author deliberately just chooses to talk mostly about San Francisco, not because San Francisco is particularly bad or different than anywhere in the US, but because San Francisco has such a progressive reputation, the author is basically if I can convince you that it has deeply racist policies, you could be convinced that the entire rest of the United States does. So most of the stories in it are actually Bay Area focused.
Yeah.
And for that strategic reason, which I also thought was an interesting point about things. But they talk a lot about zoning law and how the way the federal government ran government housing and like different things that happened, and stuff that was technically illegal but was overlooked by authorities because they didn't want to make stuff legal. So just all kinds of things. So it's a good book, although obviously not a great topic, but just
An
it's
important
kind of one
topic,
of those things. Yeah, it's like it's important to remember these things have happened in living memory about people who are like older than me. But you just like the past is racist, but then you like read some history and you're like, wow, it's somehow even worse than that. So anyway, a sobering but good book. So that's the only thing I'm like actively reading right this second.
Yeah, it's a good recommendation. Yeah, that's and yeah, I mean the Bay Area history is rife with it. So yeah, best of my knowledge, no community is really, as you say, it's just like this was very, very pervasive and deeply uncomfortable, but something that is important to confront and learn about.
Yeah.
All right. Any other recommendations? Other books? We've got a good. I've got a good reading list. Yeah, Tom, go ahead.
I dropped it in the chat, and it's science fiction, so you might not like it. But
you know what? Go ahead, try me.
The book's by John Sundman. I think the first one is Acts of the Apostles, and it features a fictionalized company, which is a merger of Sun and Digital, and a lot of thinly veiled fictionalized executives. So it's a fun read.
This sounds like the genre. This is like business science fiction, is what it sounds like.
Right.
So now this is some science fiction I can get behind.
Yeah, and I don't know if you know John Sundman, but he was a tech writer on the East Coast, one of the first East Coast employees, and so he's still pretty active writing stuff.
That sounds great. No, that sounds like a great read. And sorry, what did you say the title was?
Acts of the Apostles.
Acts of the Apostles. All right.
Not a science fiction title, but
yeah. And when was it written? Is it kind of current day, or is it?
It's written in early '90s, I think, and then he's done kind of a couple of riffs on it and updates, and so it's a little bit hard figuring out what order to read things in.
And this is Acts, like ACTS of the Apostles.
Right.
Man, I'm just getting like a bunch of free downloads from the Catholic online learning resources. I gotta.
Yeah, you gotta search for John Sundman, Sundman.
Oh, there we go. I got it. Okay. Yeah, this looks good. I'll have to. I tried to read some Werner Vinge. To be like, I like the idea, like, this obviously coined the Vingian singularity. I like the idea of like software archaeologists. I thought was really interesting. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to like just sit down and really force myself to read this. And it was just, I just couldn't get through the first page.
It's funny. I just started reading him too. And it is very slow going at first, but now I'm getting into it.
Okay. So maybe I need to, and Tom, you're a science fiction reader. Like, I mean, you enjoy science fiction, right?
Oh yeah. My wasted youth.
Right.
I think I've read at least 50 books by Philip K. Dick. Just
yeah. Do you recommend that? I mean, what is a good, to someone who is not a science fiction reader? What is a science fiction book you'd recommend? Is that an unfair question?
Oh, the one I really liked was The Sparrow.
And what'd you say, Steve? The Guin?
Le Guin, Ursula Le Guin.
Ursula Le Guin. Okay.
Yeah. I could also pick specific ones, but just like that is how I always point people to if they like want to experience science fiction. She's my favorite author in general in that genre.
Awesome. That's a great recommendation.
She's great. With The Sparrow, it's a story of first contact and how everything can go wrong, and it's pretty hilarious.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I do want to get more into it because I think it's an important genre, and I need to like, what's my problem? Why can't I just, I don't know. So yeah, I'm excited to. Those are a bunch of good recommendations. All right, do we? Now is where I need to make sure that there were not speaking requests that I missed, or maybe there are. Hold on, just a second. Oh yes, sorry, I've got 2 speaking requests that I need to process. There we go. Ian's coming back, and Ben's here. All right, Ben, do you have a recommendation?
Yeah. First, just a comment. You reminded me before. Oh gosh, talking about maritime disasters. In response to a previous episode, I bought Flying Blind and immediately took it on an airplane and started reading the book during takeoff. Realized my mistake and put the book down.
Right. What did you think of Flying Blind, though? Wasn't that good? I thought Flying Blind was really good.
The book is written in this dark and brutal way, especially the open. Like it hits hard right out of the gate, and it also like it pushes like the humanity and the actual like truly terrible, like on top of how like screwed the business model and everything was. That also kind of surprised me. I expected it to be more technical than it was, but it was really about business and management and really trying to drive home how awful these accidents really were.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
which I actually appreciated, because I felt like there was, I mean, just bluntly, there was some implicit racism in the dismissal of both the Indonesian crash and especially the Ethiopian crash. As someone who has flown Ethiopian Airways and absolutely loved it, it's a terrific flying experience, and I'd recommend Ethiopian in a heartbeat to anybody. It was a great airline, and I thought they were really, really maligned. And man, those poor pilots, they were absolutely doing the right thing in the Ethiopian air crash, especially. Anyway.
Yeah, so I'm currently reading a book by Daniel Kahneman called Thinking Fast and Slow.
Yes.
So, you've heard of this?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I've heard of it as well. Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely been of note. And are you liking it?
Oh, it is a little bit challenging to get through at first, because every couple pages, I'm like, oh my goodness, I just need to think about this for a little bit, and like, because it starts dredging up so many examples of like weird behavior that you've seen people do or that you've noticed in yourself, and then all of these things make sense. But I'm very much in the back half of the book now, which is much more about all the psychology that Kahneman and Tversky developed, making its way into economics, and that is also a little trippy.
Yeah, so I've not read Thinking Fast and Slow, but I've read Michael Lewis wrote The Undoing Project, another terrible title, not a good title, but that is about actually Kahneman and Tversky and their kind of partnership and collaboration.
Yeah, I read that too.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. So, but you're enjoying Thinking Fast and Slow.
Oh yeah, I think the other thing is I at some point I need to go through here and like pick out all the papers and such that Kahneman references. It is like, I mean, of course it's written by a scientist, college professor, researcher, but it is incredibly well cited. Like almost every statement that he makes is attributed to some particular study. Like, some paper by some, usually, mentions author's last name and year or something like that.
Right. Interesting. That sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. A good one. Do you any other suggestions? Not to put you on the spot, but so make sure you got through the ones you had. Excellent.
Yep. Suggestions given.
And Ian, were you coming back to?
Yeah, I went back through the show notes and realized I had not recommended this one that I had read a few years back. It's called The Man Who Solved the Market, How Jim Simons Launched the Quant Revolution by Gregory Zuckerman. It's a book about Greg Simons and the Renaissance quants, their medallion fund, and how Jim Simons kind of started the quant revolution and that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's interesting. And when is that? Are they?
I think they. So he was tinkering on it for a while, and it did not really bear fruit until the late '80s, like '88 or something.
Interesting.
And it kind of kicks up on his early research, his early kind of. It follows his life basically, and it does also talk about Robert Mercer a bit and how he fits in with the funding of right-wing PACs and various other kind of things that he's been associated with.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'd be interested to read wait, this looks like a good book, but because it was like D.E. Shaw and O'Connor and Associates, right, in Chicago that were on in the 80s, that were beginning to discover that they could do these things kind of algorithmically. They could trade algorithmically. They could front run. They could do, and apparently it was like just an era where it was like really easy to front run because there are these big trades. You could see these big trades happening and very easily get in front of them. There's a lot of money to be made. But yeah, this is and well written. It sounds like.
Yeah, I enjoyed this one. This is a good one. At least from memory, is about 3 years ago that I read this one.
Yeah. There's another book of that ilk about quants called The Predictors. And this is about the group that got started in Santa Fe, basically a bunch of chaos theory people and some guys who used to cheat at blackjack with computers in their shoes and stuff like that. So it's good fun.
And so what was that? Sounds like the eudaimonic pie.
No,
because the eudaimonic pie is roulette, not blackjack. Have you read the eudaimonic pie? Have we not talked about the eudaimonic pie, Tom? The eudaimonic pie, which is
This is hilarious because Amazon has just said frequently brought together the predictors and the eudaimonic pie. So
eudaimonic pie, okay.
And I forget how, but my the predictors was about the prediction company.
Got it.
One of my brothers ended up as COO there in the later years. But
is this the brother that invented the optical mouse?
Nope. That was my smart brother.
That's the smart brother, right? God, the Line family, amazing. Yeah, that looks so. The eudaimonic pie, I want to get the predictors. The eudaimonic pie is a really good book. Another not great title, but about. Have you read this, Tom? This is about the UC Santa Cruz.
I don't think I have.
So this is Doyne Farmer, who is now at the Santa Fe Institute, and this is physicists and computer scientists at the UC Santa Cruz. A same kind of thing. It was computers in their shoes, and they had decided that, like, look, roulette is Newtonian. We can predict roulette. And it's an amazing story, nonfiction, really incredible. And they are the reason that electronic devices are banned in casinos. So definitely worth reading.
I don't think I read that, but there's clearly a heavy overlap with the prediction.
Clearly a heavy overlap, yes. And I enjoyed, to folks who have read Ben Masters' Burning Down the House, which is a very entertaining, but kind of like, it's a little bit of cotton candy, book about card counting, I recommend the eudaimonic pie, because it's, again, not a good title. I feel like, is our titles that hard? I feel like we got a lot of great books with titles that are kind of mediocre here, or worse. I feel like we could do better on titles, but
Burning Down the House is heavily overused.
Burning Down, yes, that is an entertaining book, though. Burning Down the House is a very entertaining book about.
I didn't have to think about. Oh,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, I got to be easy about that because the title of my book is just literally the thing that it is, so I didn't have to think about
yes.
it. So it wasn't hard for me, but for other titles, I'm sure it's one of the most difficult parts of writing a book.
Yeah, I mean, the Rust programming language, I gotta say, that's a pretty good title, and a lot of those books could serve to learn from your book, Steve, and they should give it a book that's
simply just be about a nonfiction thing that can be explained very simply. It's just that easy to have a good title to your book. No big deal.
It's that easy. Good stuff. All right. Well, again, I want to make sure that everyone got a chance to offer theirs. But as we did previously, we got a lot of really good books in here. Oh, hold on, where did I have now lost the channel. But a lot of good stuff, a lot of good reading for the next year. And I actually went back and listened to the episode from last year and realized that I've got some things that I had meant to click on that I didn't quite purchase. So, but in years I've already bought a couple of the ones that you recommended, so they're already en route.
I I appreciate that you that you like my recommendations. Thanks.
Yes, you have this. You have an extraordinary power, Ian. Use it wisely. And if then headed my way, looking forward to it. So just got the notification that it shipped, so I'm looking forward to that. All right. Well, thank you very much, Adam and Absentia. Thank you, and thanks everyone as always for Books in the Box 3. And looking forward to. We'll make this a kind of a quasi-annual tradition. So if you read any good books in the coming year, be sure to bring them next year. Thanks, everyone.